Welcome to Argus Spotlight, Growing into a Leader with Lauren Williamson, Head of Commercial Product Chemicals at Argus Media, and me, Anna Fittock, Chemicals Analyst and co-host of the Argus Women's Initiative Network podcast. I'm lucky enough to work closely with Lauren within the Chemicals Analyst team, most often when we are developing a new product or working to enhance the insight we offer to our clients. Today, however, I am particularly looking forward to our conversation for International Women's Day about Lauren's career and experiences as a leader in commodities. So welcome, Lauren, and thank you so much for joining us on the Argus Women's Initiative Network podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Anna. It's an honor to be asked to speak with you, and it's a real pleasure to get to share my views and experiences here.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to have you. So to provide some background, could you please share a little about how long you've been working at Argus Media and what kind of things you work on?
Absolutely. So I'm what they call a boomerang. I'm in my second tour of duty here at Argus.
Mm,
I first started in 2012, worked for 3 years. I started in the London office, moved to the Houston office to develop the America's Fertilizer editorial portfolio. Took a detour of about 3 years into industry, and then I
mhm.
returned and have been here at Argus since 2017. So that's going on 8 years. I spent 4 as the global head of the fertilizer sector, and in 2021 transitioned here into chemicals. So yeah, that's I guess 11 years in total.
Oh, I didn't realize you were a boomerang. I didn't realize you'd come and gone. That's really interesting.
Yes, it's surprising how many boomerangs we actually have at Argus now. And I think that's great. I think it's a testament to the quality of people that we hire, where they are welcomed back. They're leaving on very good terms, and it's also a testament to the quality of the environment in the company, where people go test out other roles, other places, and say, you know what, I had a better fit at Argus, and they come back.
Yeah, and they bring industry experience as well, which I guess can be really valuable for us. That's
Yes,
great.
definitely.
Mm. So you mentioned that during your time at Argus, you made quite a significant shift from the world of fertilizers to the chemicals market. What inspired your decision to make this switch, and what were the challenges you faced in doing so?
Oh, that's such a good question. And I was thinking about this, ahead of our call, because so many factors went into it. Transitions are
Mm,
really interesting, and they're also really, really, really hard. So I spent so many years in fertilizer, and I always knew I wanted to diversify. I told my managers, including when I came back to Argus in 2017, that I wanted to eventually move into another sector. During my time with fertilizers, we launched countless new products and initiatives. I worked closely with the team to launch the industry's first daily prices, the first green ammonia index and coverage, sponsored the acquisition of Integer Research, which really propelled our forecast services forward. And I loved that part of it. And in those 4 years, we doubled the sector's revenue, and the team was so strong, and it still is. We had amazing
mm,
talent come in through the acquisition. But in many ways, it was like the confluence of those things started to feel like a natural chapter close for me.
mhm.
And then I had a personal family situation that required me to move back to Texas in 2021. So that was the real catalyst for the timing of the transition. And it worked really well, unexpectedly well, because the company was already planning to start really investing in other expansion sector areas at that time. So Chems
Mm,
was geared for growth. And the first thing I got to do in the role was pitch the
mhm,
investment project for revamping services. And I think something I'd like to note is that my current role, it's technically a step backward in terms of
mhm.
seniority, but it was necessary if I was to open myself up to different career paths moving forward and to navigate a very different stage in life. I think too many people are held back by the idea and the optics of lateral or downward moves.
Mm,
I think there's a view that career progression should be a linear, constantly uptrending line. And it's so limiting to,
yeah,
personal fulfillment, life, career. It zigzags. You got to embrace the zigzag.
yeah. That's a really lovely perspective to share because I think a lot of us are under pressure that every career move should come with a kind of higher title and a bigger pay packet. But if that's not giving you the fulfillment or experience that you're looking for, then maybe it's actually not the right direction. So it's comforting, I think, for someone like me who's at the start of all of this to know it doesn't need to all go in one straight line. And
Yes, absolutely. I couldn't agree with that more.
mm, yeah, and this isn't your first big career move, as actually from my LinkedIn research, you began your career in a completely different industry with 6 years in broadcast media in positions from fill-in anchor to news director, which is super interesting. So, what was it like being in broadcast media in the early 2000s, and what made you make the switch to commodities?
Oh, goodness. Broadcast media was so much fun. It was a lot
Mm,
of fun. I actually started in radio and I loved it. I loved creating content, generating news, providing a service to the
yeah.
public. But the pay in radio was terrible. And so
Mm,
I transitioned into television. I did work across ABC, NBC, and Fox affiliated our own stations. But man, in TV, the hours and schedule were so bad. You'd get
yeah.
woken in the middle of the night to cover a gang shooting or a major fire. Um, Covering the crime and court beats wore me down emotionally, everything from murder cases to child abuse cases.
Yeah.
And you grow weary of, there are all kinds of memes about this on the internet now, but you grow weary of things like hurricane coverage where they make you stand in the middle of the storm, palm trees are
Mm,
thrashing against your face, and you're telling people, don't go out, don't drive, but it's very clear that you have gone out and you have driven
yeah.
to deliver the news. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
it's
Mm,
some content, TV content is just ridiculous. But
feels
something that was
illogical.
really, yeah, fun. It was like,
Yeah.
I got to cover the Obama-Hillary presidential primary, and that was so much fun because both candidates represented some really impressive firsts for American politics.
Mm,
And there were a couple of pieces I did that dovetailed very well into future PRA work. So I reported on
mm,
the advent of biodiesel and fry oil to fuel. I did an investigation into gasoline produced with too much sulfur in it and the impact on consumers. And through the financial downturn of 2008-09, it opened up my eyes to a lot of global economic realities that I hadn't
mm.
really considered before and inspired me to get my master's degree.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I guess I think I didn't touch on one part of your question with like, how did that transition happen?
Mm,
So I'm a journalist at my core, and I wanted to specialize in investigative journalism or international
mm,
journalism. And so my plan was to work in that field after completing my master's at SOAS in London. But alas, I was job hunting in London, a very crowded labor market, and an
mhm,
economy that was still feeling the aftershocks and effects of the financial crisis. I applied
yep.
for dozens and dozens and dozens of jobs and got
Mm,
rejection after rejection after rejection. Um, I landed a few interviews, some progressed, nothing stuck. And I got to the point where I was absolutely broke. I mean, living in London, totally broke, about to call it quits, call my parents and
mm,
say, I have to come move home. So I started looking at adjacent industries and I stumbled totally by accident into fertilizer price reporting.
mm,
And the word fertilizer, it's not very sexy. So I think probably the competition for the role was thinner. Most candidates
mm,
are wanting something glamorous like oil and gas. But taking
mhm,
a chance on something new was the best thing I could have done. It put me on a serious S curve of disruption. If you're not familiar with that, author Whitney Johnson writes about this a lot, and it's amazing where when we disrupt ourselves, our lives, our careers, and strategically, or sometimes it's prompted by external factors. There's this
mhm,
S curve where life is crazy, it's chaotic, it's hard, it can be miserable to learn something new and do something new. But then you start to get it and you get to ride the S curve up and you start becoming more efficient and more passionate about everything. And every time that I've done a major transition, you go through all of those
mm.
emotions and parts of the S curve. And it to me, I love it. It's part of the process and it keeps us really engaged.
Wow. So now if you're navigating a new change, would you even remind yourself like, oh, I'm just on this part of the S curve, we'll push through to the next stage?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there are there are still some things that I encounter, especially chemicals, is really complex. And I still feel very new into the chemical space. It's very humbling to be in it. And there are still, sometimes you have to work extra hard, harder than your colleagues because they know it, they get it, you don't. I've got
Mm,
to, spend a little bit extra time on the nights or weekends to try to catch up and learn some more. And it can be frustrating, but you can also say it's part of the journey. That's when the real information gets absorbed and you start to assimilate it and then can start using it. So yeah, I have to remind myself a lot.
yeah. And I feel like for those just starting out in their career, there is often pressure to get it right and know exactly what you want to do. Um, Looking back on your career so far, did it follow the plan, or did you have a plan? And do you have any advice for those trying to navigate a new career?
Oh, I laugh a little bit because I'm thinking, well, yes, I've always had a plan, but
Mm.
no, I've never been able to exactly follow the plan. Yes, having an idea of what I want to do next, where I want to go, what kind of role I want, or the skills I want to strengthen. I always have that in mind. But to date, I mean, plans they can be futile sometimes. It's kind of like
Mm,
the forecasting work that we do, right? We have a really strong narrative, but forecasts are always wrong. If we get the direction
mm.
right, that's a win. So, life happens, opportunities come unexpectedly, or challenges prompt choices you didn't think you'd have to make. 10 years ago, I would have probably prioritized career over family. I didn't
Mhm.
have my own nuclear family at that time. But that's changed for me. I've got a toddler now. And with a toddler, it makes some types of roles really hard. Work travel becomes a lot harder. So, in a
Yeah.
few years, that'll change again, and the nature of my work or the roles that I'm interested might change. Um, and I guess for your question on advice, I think you have to be willing to raise your hand and say you need help or that you don't know something when you're doing something new or trying something new or transitioning or looking at transitions. And
Mhm.
just being willing to take a chance and inject yourself into new projects and ideas. Finding a mentor is another one. But at the end of the day, more than a plan, I think you just have to know your North Star in everything that you do in your life and every role you have. What is it that lights you on fire? What helps you connect to a wider purpose, goal, passion, skill set? That's what gets you through the difficult days and the low points of the S curve and helps you really accelerate your career, in my view.
Yeah, I love that. I'm going to definitely have a think about what my North Star is. And another thing that caught my eye when looking at your LinkedIn was the sheer number, I counted 12, and range of voluntary positions you've taken over the years. I saw an ambassador at the International Fertilizer Association, that you've been a foster carer with Houston SPCA. And I was wondering if you could share any notable experiences from your volunteering and whether you feel it has helped you in your paid career.
That is a really interesting question because in general, my voluntary work hasn't been career inspired. Yes,
Mhm.
some voluntary roles, they've been industry specific and they can be really good for networking and exposure. But my favorite volunteering, it's actually the kind that I guess helps me connect to helping and serving others in the wider public.
Mm,
So working, with the disadvantaged populations or hosting kids from different countries, taking care of sick or injured animals, things like
mm,
that. It kind of helps me get out of the safe bubble of my own life and helps
yeah,
me like be more grateful for the things in my life. So maybe to that end, I would say I hope these things help make me more compassionate and therefore a better manager and colleague. Um, Probably the most notable volunteering experience for me. My husband and I, we have worked with the AFS, the American Field Service, and hosted
okay.
exchange student before, and have worked as liaisons for exchange students who are in high school. And that's been so important to me because I never got the chance to travel abroad until I decided to pursue a master's in London. I've done
Oh,
tons
wow.
of
Okay.
travel since then. Yeah, I,
Mm,
I think so many people, more people need to do that, especially in America. It's harder to. It's
Mm,
harder to do it. It's not as easy as it is if you live in London and getting to different places. And
yeah.
so I feel like it makes the world a better place. It helps you better understand other cultures. And so participate in organizations like that helps me serve that passion area of my life.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And yeah, it's probably something we don't consider so much if you're based in Europe like I am, how accessible it is to visit other countries and hear people speaking other languages. And yeah, in a country so big as America, you might become a little landlocked.
Yes, and America is actually surprisingly a pretty homogenized culture. You have nuances, of course. I mean, New
Hmm.
York and New Orleans and LA are all going to be very different to
Mm,
Iowa, the Midwest, Texas, but you don't have the same proximity to really strong cultures that are super different from your own as you do
mm,
when you live in a lot of places in Europe. And that's so important to developing how we view politics, how we view the world, how we interpret and understand the news.
mm.
Yeah, it's travel is such a beautiful and important thing. And I'm really grateful my career has supported a lot of travel for me, which has enriched me a lot.
Yeah, that's really lovely to hear. And thinking of maybe, yeah, those experiencing of I guess difference. If you reflect on being a leader in a male-dominated sector, do you have any advice for aspiring female leaders on how to make an impact and move up in your career?
Yes, definitely have some ideas on that. Probably too many, probably
Mm,
too many for a limited podcast. Um,
mhm,
but I think my personal view is that it's really important for women to understand the patriarchal roots of the society, culture, the business landscape that we operate in.
mm,
And when you recognize the historical context, I guess my recommendation is also don't carry resentment over it because that will eat you alive. So
yeah.
that's one piece of advice. Um, and I think only with acceptance and understanding of the system can you get creative about how you position yourself in a male dominated environment. And
Mhm,
trust me, I do not mean submitting to all the expectations or all the implicit codes of conduct and what to say and what to wear and how to act, but I guess I more mean finding your niche. How and where can you be the best version of yourself? There was something I was reading recently about how we as women should take inventory of and pride in all the ways that we might be influencing and changing the dominant culture every day with what we do. And maybe it's just being a working mom and showing up. Maybe it's having the courage to network at a male
mm,
dominated event that scares you. Maybe it's being active in women's organizations like WIN, or mentoring or sponsoring other women. And then maybe it's also rebelling in small ways. Like some of the instances they referenced was, dyeing your hair purple, refusing to wear heels.
mm,
All of those are important things because when you feel trapped in a system, and of course, I recommend not viewing it as feeling trapped because that'll limit your creativity, but forms of rebellion can feel really good. And especially if these acts are actually acts of authenticity and influence, you find ways to show up every day as your true self. You embrace and accept others for doing the same. And that's how culture changes.
mm.
Um, gosh, I don't want to talk too much. I think I've got one or two other tips on that. Should I carry
Yeah,
on?
please share.
Um, okay, so a second tip, and I guess I mentioned a little bit before, and it kind of taps into that S curve I'm talking about. But you got to be willing to try things you haven't. I've tried I've tried sometimes to adapt more to the prevailing industry culture in some ways.
Mhm,
I think it was probably 2015 or 16. I decided I really wanted to get good at golf because I wanted to participate in the golfing networking events.
yep.
I took private lessons and I was terrible, and I was so terrible that it made it not so fun for me. And so
Yep.
I had to take a look at that and be like, "You know what? This is not a good fit. I'm not good at sports, and this doesn't work for me." But I gave it a try.
Mm.
And fortunately, you can find other avenues to network and connect. And I've done much better connecting over good food and wine. And unfortunately, I think those are activities any gender can appreciate. And I would also say the third tip is kind of trickier. I've been really fortunate that I've had career sponsors, and these are different to mentors. This is
Okay.
someone very senior in an organization who is actively advocating on behalf of your career, often behind the scenes. So you may not even know you have a sponsor
Mm.
until some sort of opportunity comes up. Um, Male sponsors in a male dominated industry carry a lot of weight, but we do have more and more senior women who are serving this type of vital role. I think as an individual contributor, being proactive, offering ideas, putting yourself out there, it's how you get noticed. With one of my career sponsors, I think I gained his attention after I had the guts to formally pitch a business idea to him with a fully drafted revenue generating proposal. And that kind of pitch was way, way outside of the scope of my then editorial role at the time.
Mm.
He was far, far more senior to me, but I really believed in the idea and I knocked on his door and he opened it up to the conversation. That idea died. I mean, it just didn't even go anywhere, not at all. But the impression that I made on him lasted, and it brought me opportunities down the road. So, put yourself out there. Don't be afraid to knock on doors of people more senior to you, especially if you have something valuable to offer. I think, and I find this to be the case at Argus, I think a lot of our most senior leaders really want people to feel like their door is open. Please knock on the door. They like to hear different ideas. I think they're aware that it's easy to get caught in cycles and circles of the same people with the same and similar ideas. So hearing from different areas of the business and different individual contributors is actually a huge, huge benefit.
Yeah, that's really nice to hear as well, and kind of I think, a sign not to limit yourself to maybe your job title and think, should I be talking to this person? Or, yeah, am I almost quote unquote allowed to be doing this thing, to just go for it and, yeah, give it a try? I really like that.
Yes.
That sounds good.
Yes, just go for it.
Yeah, yeah. So that's how, yeah, we as women can make an impact. But finally, how do you think that organizations can support and empower women to take on leadership roles in traditionally male-dominated sectors?
I think companies can support women by doing all they can to facilitate a really strong culture that's open, accepting, and that ties to who you hire, who you
Mhm.
retain. And it's also underpinned by a framework of policies that really support women. Um, at Argus, I see a lot of support through the Women's Initiative and through the mentorship programs, through the types of people we hire. I think we have some really incredible, wonderful people at the company. And
Mm.
companies also have to focus on, create a safe space for women, zero tolerance policies on harassment or behavior, and also thinking about, particularly for women, they get pulled and strained by having to juggle two worlds, domestic and corporate worlds, especially when it comes to family raising. Um,
Mm.
I think policies around extended maternity, paternity leave, creating hybrid and flexible schedules for parents, or really supportive sick and dependent care leave policies, those are all really important facets of it as well. So there are a lot of ways companies can support, and I think the biggest way is by hiring the right people who reinforce a culture that's very, um, very accepting and open, and that's very positive for women in the workplace.
Well, thank you so much, Lauren, for today's conversation and happy International Women's Day.
Well, happy International Women's Day to you too, Anna, and thanks for reaching out to me, asking such good questions. It really has been a fun conversation to have. I I genuinely hope it inspires others to reflect on their own paths in some new ways.